Rain hammered relentlessly against the metal roof of Camp McAllister, the kind of storm that made the barracks feel alive, as if the wind itself were conspiring to test anyone brave enough to step outside. Holly Mercer moved with quiet determination down the dimly lit corridor, a duffel bag slung over one shoulder, her boots slapping softly against the wet concrete. Her hair, tied neatly into a bun, was damp from the relentless drizzle seeping through the cracked windows. She didn't look like a threat. She didn't look like anything, really, just another recruit, exhausted from relentless drills, sleep-deprived, mud-streaked, barely 20 years old. And that's exactly why the 4 recruits at the end of the hallway chose her. Curtis, Diaz, Walton, and Briggs had been watching her for days, the way she avoided conversation, the way she stayed calm under the constant shouting of instructors, the way she never cowered under punishment or struggled through exercises like the rest. They'd whispered about her when they thought she wasn't listening, mocking her silence. They said she thought she was better than them. She didn't, of course, she simply moved differently, and that alone terrified them. Now, with half the base plunged into darkness by the storm, the opportunity had finally presented itself. A chance to teach her a lesson. Holly moved steadily, hearing the faintest murmur of boots behind her. She sensed it before she saw it, the shift in the air, the scrape of leather-soled boots. Instincts honed from years she didn't intend to reveal. Her body tensed subtly, every muscle coiled like a spring. And then they stepped into view. 4 shadows solidified at the end of the corridor. Curtis cracked his knuckles with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Where you going, Mercer?" he asked, voice low and mocking. Holly lifted her head slowly, calm and measured. "To laundry," she said evenly, as if statting the weather. Walton laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Not anymore." They closed in, forming a loose semicircle. Holly dropped her duffel carefully, almost ritualistically, as if she'd already anticipated this moment. Her eyes scanned them briefly, noting angles, movements, stance. Curtis stepped forward, chest puffed out. "You don't talk, you don't eat with us, you don't run with us, you think you're special." "I don't think that," Holly replied calmly. Her tone held no fear, no anger, only clarity. Diaz leaned in, smirking. "Then what do you think you are?" Holly exhaled slowly, almost imperceptibly. "I think," she said, "you should move." Curtis laughed sharp and loud. "Or what? You gonna cry to the instructors, call your mommy?" A sudden clap of thunder rattled the ceiling, vibrating through the concrete floor. Holly's right foot pivoted almost invisibly, a shift in stance so subtle that none of the 4 could have anticipated it. Curtis, arrogant as ever, reached for her shoulder, a mistake he'd regret in less than a heartbeat. The next 2 seconds became chaos. Holly seized his wrist, twisted with precision, and Curtis slammed against the wall. The sound was sharp, bone against metal. Diaz lunged, but Holly swept his legs from under him in one fluid motion, sending him sprawling onto the floor. Walton froze, unsure whether to flee or fight, and Briggs blinked, stunned into silence. The 4 recruits stared at her, wide-eyed. Fear, disbelief, and awe battled across their faces. She was small, 5'3", barely 120 pounds, but her movements were lethal, practiced, perfect. Curtis wiped blood from his lips, stammering, How did you?" Holly's voice cut through the tension, low and deliberate. "Remember who I am." It wasn't a threat, it wasn't a plea. It was a warning, a command carried on a calm, undeniable authority. The recruits froze. "Remember who I am." What could she mean? Before any of them could react, another sound shattered the hallway, a metal door clanging open. An instructor's boots echoed, rapid and authoritative. The 4 cornerers turned instinctively, and in that brief distraction Holly's form shifted. Her posture snapped into alignment, feet balanced, shoulders squared. Her face held the same calm, almost indifferent expression, but now it radiated command. Briggs whispered, shaking, "She's not human." Curtis growled, furious and confused, "Explain yourself." Holly's lips curved into a tiny, controlled smile. "No," she said simply. A low rumble of thunder punctuated the silence, as if nature itself agreed. Diaz swallowed hard. "Then what now?" Holly's eyes swept over the four, sharp and assessing. "Now, you realize exactly why they warned you, why they said to blend in, to start fresh. Some things can't be unlearned." The instructor's boots grew louder. Holly didn't flinch. Instead, she shifted her duffel, adjusted her stance, and prepared for the next move, not with aggression but with strategy. Curtis clenched his fists. "You cornered us first, now it's—" A flash of lightning illuminated the hall, casting long, jagged shadows across their faces. The recruits froze, eyes locked on her, and for the first time they noticed every subtle movement, the calm control in her breathing, the way her muscles coiled and relaxed as if anticipating each of their motions. "Remember," Holly said softly, almost regretfully, "you had 45 seconds to understand who I am." The instructor's shout drew closer, steps pounding down the hall. Curtis turned, the first to break the tension, but Holly didn't flinch. Instead, she moved. In the flicker of lightning and the shadow of the storm, Holly Mercer stepped forward, the air around her charged, every recruit realizing in that instant they had misjudged her completely. The storm outside grew louder. The hallway stretched longer, darker, charged with the anticipation of what would happen next. In those 45 seconds, everything changed. Holly's calm, deadly efficiency had revealed the truth. She was no ordinary recruit. She was trained, disciplined, and utterly lethal. And now, as the instructor's voice echoed down the hall, the four cornerers would learn the hardest lesson of their lives. Some people are impossible to corner. And Holly Mercer was one of them. The metallic clatter of the instructor's boots reverberated through the dim hallway, each echo a countdown. Holly Mercer's eyes, calm yet razor-sharp, flicked to the approaching figure. Curtis, Diaz, Walton, and Briggs scrambled backward, their faces pale and flushed, hearts hammering in unison with the storm outside. The instructor rounded the corner, Lieutenant Commander Reynolds, a veteran with decades of experience and a reputation for zero tolerance. His gaze swept the group, lingering on Holly. For a fleeting moment, his stern expression softened. "Holly Mercer," Reynolds said in a voice that carried authority effortlessly, "step aside." The recruits blinked, confusion clouding their panic. "Step aside," Curtis muttered under his breath, as if saying it aloud could explain what was happening. Holly didn't move. She remained poised, a picture of controlled calm, her weight evenly distributed, eyes meeting Reynolds with the subtle acknowledgement of recognition. She was no longer just a recruit. She was something else entirely. "Move," Reynolds repeated, and Holly stepped just enough to allow him past, no hesitation, no unnecessary motion, nothing casual about it. Curtis could no longer contain himself. What is she?" he whispered, his voice shaky. She's not like us. Look at her, she fought us like." Diaz interrupted, voice cracking. Like someone trained, someone like a SEAL." Holly's lips twitched into a small, almost imperceptible smile. She didn't confirm. She didn't deny. She only let the silence linger, suffocating, heavy. The storm outside pounded harder against the metal roof, echoing like the drums of anticipation in the hallway. The four recruits shifted nervously, unable to take their eyes off her. Reynolds finally spoke again, his voice calm but weighted with significance. "You just realized the mistake you made. Let me make it clear before you try anything else. She's not a regular recruit. Holly Mercer is a former Navy SEAL, and she's here to test you." The words landed like a hammer. Curtis staggered back involuntarily as if struck. Walton's jaw went slack. Diaz's fingers trembled, brushing against his sweat-dampened hair. Briggs went pale. A SEAL," Curtis croaked, unable to form a coherent thought. "You can't, she's just a girl." Reynolds' eyes hardened. Not just a girl, not just a SEAL. She's among the best we've ever trained. And you had 45 seconds to realize it and you failed." Holly didn't look at them again. She folded her arms lightly across her chest, eyes scanning the darkened hallway as if considering what other tests might await. The recruit's fear became almost tangible. "Do you understand what you did?" Reynolds continued, his gaze sweeping over Curtis and the others. "You cornered a highly trained operative. You humiliated yourselves in the process. That's a failure. A literal failure in situational awareness, and in combat terms it could have cost lives." The four cornerers exchanged glances. Each understood instinctively that this wasn't just a lecture. This was a lesson etched in pain, humiliation, and raw, undeniable truth. Holly finally spoke, her voice calm, almost weary. "I wasn't looking for conflict," she said quietly. "I wasn't looking to prove anything. But when you cornered me, I had to respond. You gave me no other choice." Curtis, still sputtering with disbelief, stepped forward. You didn't have to fight us like that. We weren't ready and you." "Stop," Holly interrupted, her voice cutting through the storm's roar outside, through the pounding of their own hearts. "Stop blaming me for your ignorance. You made your own choice, and now you'll carry the consequences of that choice. The question is, do you want to learn from it or continue embarrassing yourselves?" Dias swallowed hard. We want to learn," he admitted, his voice barely audible. Briggs, shaking, whispered, "We don't even know how to follow her. What do we do?" Holly's eyes narrowed, not in anger but in focus. "Follow," she said simply. "Obey, listen, move when I move. Fail to do that and you fail entirely." The hallway fell into tense silence. The storm outside seemed to hold its breath. Curtis looked at the four recruits, then at Holly, and his face twisted in defiance and awe. He wanted to scoff, to act tough, to reclaim whatever dignity he felt slipping away. But he couldn't. Not with her standing there, calm, composed, impossibly controlled. You've done this before," Curtis said finally, voice edged with fear. Holly's head tilted slightly. "Yes, and every time I've learned that humans underestimate what they cannot see. You did not see me. You never saw me." Walton shivered. She's impossible," he muttered. Holly's gaze swept over them again, sharp and calculating. She didn't speak, didn't move. And yet the four recruits felt the weight of her presence like gravity pressing down on them. Reynolds stepped forward, clapping once sharply. "Holly Mercer," he said, voice authoritative. "You will continue training as planned, but the four of you will watch, you will observe, and you will respect the process or you will fail. And I promise failure here is permanent." The four cornerers looked at one another. Fear, shame, and awe combined into a single oppressive weight. Curtis opened his mouth, then closed it. No words were adequate. Holly's presence alone made him feel exposed, small, and utterly unprepared. Holly finally moved, the soft rustle of her uniform the only sound as she collected her duffel. She walked past the four cornerers with a measured, almost regal step, every motion calculated, every detail precise. They followed silently, too afraid to speak, too shocked to protest. Outside, the rain had intensified. Lightning flashed, illuminating the storm-soaked yard through the broken windows. Holly paused briefly at the door, letting the light wash over her face. Shadows danced across her features, emphasizing the calm, lethal precision of someone trained for situations far beyond ordinary comprehension. She turned to the four recruits one last time before stepping outside. "Remember," she said softly, almost a whisper, yet somehow carrying the weight of a command. "You had 45 seconds, and in those 45 seconds, you learned the hardest truth here." Then she moved into the storm. The rain pelted down in sheets, drenching her uniform instantly, but she walked as if the water were nothing, as if the storm were merely an accessory to her presence. The four recruits followed, hearts hammering, minds racing, unable to tear their eyes away from her. The storm, the rain, the echoes of that short but terrifying encounter. It all pressed in on them, leaving Curtis, Diaz, Walton, and Briggs with one undeniable thought. They had no idea who they had cornered. And as Holly disappeared into the yard, a streak of determination against the gray storm, the recruits realized something else, something even more chilling. The 45 seconds weren't over. The real test was just beginning. The rain had eased into a steady drizzle, but the ground of the Camp McAllister training yard was still slick with mud and puddles. Holly Mercer strode across the field with purposeful steps, her duffel bag slung over one shoulder. Curtis, Diaz, Walton, and Briggs followed at a cautious distance, each of them silently wrestling with the truth that had just been forced upon them. Holly Mercer was no ordinary recruit. She was a Navy SEAL, a living demonstration of lethal precision, calm under pressure, and skill honed by years of extreme experience. The yard was a chaotic scene. Recruits climbed ropes, vaulted over walls, and slogged through mud trenches. Instructors barked orders, their voices sharp and unforgiving, their whistles cutting through the air. The four cornerers kept their eyes on Holly, careful not to let her out of sight. Holly's movements were deceptively casual as she approached the first obstacle, a 20-foot rope climb dripping with rainwater. She set her duffel down, glanced at the recruits behind her, and without a word began her ascent. Every motion was smooth, fluid, her hands gripping the wet rope with confidence, her legs driving her upward with a controlled, almost mechanical precision. Diaz whispered under his breath, unable to contain his awe, She's like a machine." Briggs swallowed hard, nodding. "I've never seen anyone move like that, not in basic, not ever." Curtis, still trying to mask his fear, muttered, "It's impossible. She's small, she's light, but she moves like she's 20 years in the field." At the top, Holly paused for a moment and surveyed the yard. Her eyes swept over the mud-caked recruits struggling with obstacles that had already exhausted them, then landed on the four cornerers. Curtis flinched under her gaze, feeling exposed, powerless. Without warning, Holly descended the rope with a controlled drop that made it look effortless. She landed silently, then moved toward the next obstacle, a wall that required timing, grip, and brute strength. She planted her feet, twisted her body with grace, and scaled it in moments, pulling herself up and over with ease. Walton muttered, voice trembling, How is she doing all of this so easily? We're supposed to be in shape for this. And she's untouchable." Holly didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her performance spoke volumes. Every recruit in the yard noticed. Every eye followed her, some with envy, others with fear. After completing the first set of obstacles, Holly moved toward a tactical drill area. The instructors had set up a simulated combat scenario. Multiple hostiles, represented by dummies, scattered across the muddy field. The recruits were meant to navigate the terrain, approach each target silently, and neutralize it. Holly's approach was methodical, each movement deliberate and exact. She neutralized each dummy with precision, sweeping, twisting, and controlling her environment in a way that made the others' frantic, clumsy attempts look amateurish. Briggs muttered, I don't think anyone here could keep up with her, not even the instructors." Holly's eyes flicked toward the four cornerers. Curtis, attempting to regain some semblance of composure, stepped forward. "You think this makes you better than us? You're just showing off." Holly didn't flinch. She tilted her head slightly, her wet hair plastered against her forehead. "Showing off? No. Demonstrating what it means to survive, to move with control, and to follow orders under pressure. Something you all will need to understand if you're going to last here." Diaz's voice cracked, a mix of fear and awe. "Survive? She makes it look like it's easy, but it's not, it's impossible." Holly moved again, this time toward a series of mud trenches that had been partially flooded by the storm. She leapt effortlessly, landing with perfect balance and poise, mud spraying around her boots. She pivoted smoothly, eyes on the cornerers. "Your turn," she said simply. The four recruits exchanged nervous glances. Curtis took the lead, attempting to follow Holly's path. He misjudged a leap, slipped, and plunged into the water-filled trench with a loud splash. Holly observed without expression, then moved on to the next obstacle, leaving Curtis soaked, humiliated, and trembling. Walton groaned as he scrambled over the trench walls. Diaz wiped mud from his face, and Briggs quietly cursed under his breath. Holly's calmness, her effortless control, made them all painfully aware of their own inadequacies. As the recruits struggled, Holly stopped at the edge of the field and raised her hand. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating her figure. She looked like something out of a cinematic scene, rain pouring over her, mud streaked across her uniform, eyes sharp and unyielding. "Remember," she said quietly, almost to herself but loud enough for the cornerers to hear, "they don't know who I am yet, but they will." Curtis's jaw clenched. He had realized fully that the quiet, small girl he had tried to intimidate was not just trained, she was exceptional, and he had no idea how to approach her now. The rest of the yard paused for a moment as the thunder rolled overhead. The storm mirrored the tension that had grown between Holly and the four recruits. Everyone was watching, sensing that something significant had shifted. Reynolds' voice cut through the air, sharp and commanding. "Recruits, time for the next exercise, pairs for advanced tactical drills, move out." Holly glanced at the four cornerers. "You'll be with me," she said. Curtis and the others froze, unsure whether to be terrified or relieved. They had no choice. They had been paired with Holly Mercer, and the thought alone made their stomachs churn. "Follow my lead," she said softly. "Every step, every move, every decision matters. Fail, and you fail everything you think you know about this training." The four cornerers obeyed, trailing her as she led them toward the tactical obstacle course. Holly moved with fluid grace, each step calculated, her senses heightened. Curtis whispered under his breath, "How can one person be this good?" Briggs muttered, "I don't know if we're ready for this." Holly's voice cut through the tension, calm yet commanding. "Ready isn't a choice, it's a result of discipline. You will learn it or you will fail." As they approached the edge of the course, a shadow moved near the tree line, a figure watching, evaluating, unseen by the recruits. Holly noticed immediately, her gaze sharpening. A faint smile crossed her lips. Someone else was observing the chaos she had orchestrated. The four cornerers followed blindly, unaware of the eyes on them, unaware of the storm of training and revelation awaiting them. Holly's control over every movement, every reaction was unshakable. And as they stepped onto the next obstacle, Curtis realized the full truth. Their nightmare and their lesson had only just begun. Lightning struck again in the distance, illuminating Holly's figure. The four recruits could only stare, hearts pounding, realizing they were not merely following a trainee. They were following a legend in action. And in that moment, the words she had whispered echoed in their minds. "They don't know who I am yet, but they will." The rain fell harder, the mud deeper, the tension thicker. And Holly Mercer led them forward, every motion a demonstration of skill, control, and lethal precision. The four recruits had 45 seconds to grasp it the first time. Now, with the training yard as their arena, they were about to discover just how far Holly Mercer would push them, and whether they could survive the storm she brought with her. Night had fallen over Camp McAllister, the storm reduced to a steady drizzle, the occasional thunder rumble still vibrating through the barracks walls. Inside, the recruits huddled in their assigned bunks, exhausted and soaked from the day's grueling training. Holly Mercer sat on the edge of her bunk, her uniform still damp, her hair plastered to her forehead. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence alone filled the room with quiet authority. Curtis, Diaz, Walton, and Briggs sat together in a corner, huddled like schoolboys caught in a nightmare. The events of the day replayed in their minds with excruciating clarity. The lightning-fast incapacitation in the hallway, the flawless obstacle course execution, and Holly's cold, calculated dominance in the yard. They couldn't escape the truth. She was not only skilled, she was exceptional, a living standard of precision and lethal control. I can't believe it, Dia's whispered voice trembling. She's actually a seal. Briggs nodded weakly. Yeah, I mean I knew something was off, but this is insane. She's untouchable. Curtis ran a hand through his hair, jaw clenched. We tried to corner her. We thought we had the advantage, and she demolished us in seconds. We didn't even touch her. Walton shivered, glancing toward Holly's bunk as if expecting her to suddenly appear behind them. It's not just that. It's the way she moves, the way she thinks. It's like she sees everything before it happens, like she's in a different dimension or something. The recruits remained silent for a few moments, letting the truth settle. Fear, humiliation, and awe clashed inside them, leaving each unsure of how to feel or what to do next. They had cornered Holly Mercer, and in return she had cornered their confidence. A soft shuffle drew their attention. Holly's eyes were closed, but her head tilted slightly, catching the subtle sounds of whispered fear. Curtis gulped. She knows we're talking about her. She always knows. Holly opened her eyes slowly, fixing the four cornerers with a gaze so calm and piercing it made them all flinch. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but carried through the tension-filled room with undeniable authority. "You're discussing me," she said, voice neutral, not accusing, just observing. Curtis froze. We. Holly held up a hand, stopping him mid-gesture. "No need to lie. I can hear the whispers. I can see the hesitation, every micro-expression, every twitch of fear, every flinch of regret." Dia swallowed hard. You can't be serious." "I am," Holly said simply. "You cornered me in the hallway today. You thought you could intimidate me, make me yield to fear, humiliation, confusion. But you learned in less than a minute exactly who you were dealing with." Briggs muttered under his breath, "And we still don't even know the half of it." Holly's gaze swept across the group. "You think this is about physical skill?" she asked. "You think it's about strength or speed?" "It is. It's about awareness. It's about control. And right now you have neither. Your fear controls you. Your arrogance misleads you. And your ignorance blinds you." Curtis clenched his fists, jaw tight, anger and shame mixing into a storm of emotion. We weren't trying to disrespect you. We just—" "You cornered me," Holly interrupted, voice calm but cutting. "And in doing so you exposed yourselves. Not because you were strong or smart, but because you failed to recognize what was in front of you. You were predictable, and predictable behavior in a battlefield setting is fatal." Silence fell. The only sound was the muted dripping of water from the storm outside, each drop echoing like a heartbeat in the barracks. Curtis, Diaz, Walton, and Briggs stared at her, realization dawning with each passing second. Holly Mercer was not here to blend in. She was here to test them, and she had already won. Diaz whispered, almost to himself, How do you even train someone to be like that?" Holly's eyes softened, almost imperceptibly, though her presence remained dominant. "You don't train for perfection. You train to survive. You train to think beyond instinct. You train to act when others freeze, to see when others ignore, to move when others falter." Briggs shivered, and we were nowhere close. Holly leaned back slightly on her bunk, her voice dropping to a whisper but still sharp enough to penetrate the cornerer's fear. "I could crush you in seconds. I could end this entire lesson in one motion. But that isn't why I'm here. I'm here so you understand, so you adapt, so you survive the moments that matter most." Curtis swallowed hard, finally meeting her gaze. "So we just follow you." Holly's lips curved into a faint, almost sad smile. "You follow, you listen, you move with precision. Fail to do that and you fail everything you thought you knew. Obedience isn't weakness. It's awareness. It's preparation. It's survival." Walton muttered, voice trembling, "And if we don't, what happens?" Holly's eyes darkened slightly, her calmness now edged with lethal certainty. "Then you fail, permanently. In this place mistakes are not forgiven lightly. In the field they are fatal. You have a choice, learn or succumb to fear. That is your test." The recruits sat, paralyzed by a mix of awe and terror. Every instinct in their bodies screamed to flee, to run, to rebel, but every muscle told them that doing so would be catastrophic. They had seen her in action today. They had felt the weight of her control. They understood viscerally that Holly Mercer was untouchable, not by brute force, not by numbers, not by arrogance. Diaz finally whispered, "She's teaching us, in her own way." "Yes," Holly said, voice steady and commanding. "But you must want to learn. Fear alone is not enough. Respect alone is not enough. You must commit entirely to following when the moment demands it. And right now, that moment is approaching faster than you think." The room fell silent. The storm outside had subsided into a whisper, but the tension inside the barracks was suffocating. Curtis, Diaz, Walton, and Briggs exchanged glances, their minds racing, their hearts pounding. And then, as if on cue, a loud clatter echoed from the hallway, something metallic, heavy, and deliberate. The cornerers jumped, glancing at Holly, expecting her to react, but she didn't flinch. Her eyes, calm and calculating, turned slightly toward the door. Holly rose from her bunk, movements deliberate, fluid, and completely controlled. "Someone is watching," she said quietly, more to herself than to the recruits, "and they are about to witness the consequences of their underestimation." The four cornerers stared at her, frozen. Fear mingled with fascination. They realized that Holly's control extended beyond the obvious. She could sense, anticipate, and respond to threats they hadn't even registered. The metallic clatter repeated, closer this time, echoing down the hall. Holly's voice was calm, but its authority was absolute. "Stay close. Watch. Learn. One mistake and it won't be a demonstration anymore." Curtis's chest tightened. He understood now that this was more than training. This was a lesson in survival, in control, in fear, delivered not with punishment, but with the presence of someone who had mastered both body and mind. As the shadow approached the barracks doorway, the four cornerers realized with a chilling certainty. The real test was beginning, and Holly Mercer was the storm they would have to endure completely, utterly, and without hesitation. The sound of boots on metal echoed sharply down the corridor outside the barracks, snapping the four cornerers upright. Curtis, Diaz, Walton, and Briggs exchanged wide-eyed glances, every nerve in their bodies on edge. Holly Mercer's posture remained calm, composed, the storm inside them nothing compared to the storm she carried within herself. The door swung open and a tall figure stepped in, Lieutenant Commander Jensen, a legend among the instructors and a veteran of decades in special operations. His presence alone commanded the room. Every recruit instinctively straightened, every voice caught in their throats. Curtis felt as if the air itself had thickened. "Holly Mercer," Jensen began, voice low, deliberate, and resonant, "you've made an impression." Holly inclined her head slightly, acknowledging him, but made no move to speak. Her eyes flicked to the four cornerers. Curtis's stomach knotted. Jensen's gaze swept the room, lingering briefly on Curtis and the others. "And you," he said, voice sharp, "have learned something very important about underestimation." Walton whispered under his breath, He knows everything." Jensen's eyes met Holly's, and for a brief moment, the four cornerers saw the recognition pass between two warriors, a silent communication that spoke volumes. They were no longer just in a training barracks. They were in the presence of strategy, precision, and lethal authority. "Let me clarify something for the record," Jensen continued, voice firm and unyielding. "Holly Mercer is not a regular recruit. She is one of the finest operators I have trained. A former Navy SEAL, second only to me in the last joint exercise. And the four of you," he gestured to Curtis, Diaz, Walton, and Briggs, "just realized it the hard way." The recruits paled. Curtis stammered, "What, that's impossible, she's just—" Jensen's expression hardened. "No, she is. And if you think you can challenge her, intimidate her, or underestimate her again, you will fail. Permanently." Holly shifted slightly, a faint smile on her lips, almost imperceptible. She had been here before, many times, teaching others lessons they weren't ready for. But this, the four cornerers, their arrogance, their ignorance, was a perfect case study in underestimation and its consequences. Diaz muttered, barely audible, She's testing us." Holly's eyes narrowed slightly. "Testing you," she said softly. "No, I'm teaching you. Testing implies uncertainty. There is no uncertainty here. The lesson is deliberate, calculated, unavoidable." Curtis swallowed hard, trying to regain some semblance of dignity. "So, what now? We follow her. Or do we what?" Holly's gaze swept over the four, sharp, unwavering, controlled. "You follow me. Every move I make, every decision I take, you watch, you learn, you adapt, you survive. And perhaps by the end you may begin to understand what it means to move beyond instinct, beyond fear, beyond expectation." Walton whispered, "And if we fail?" Holly's voice dropped, calm but lethal. "Then you will understand exactly why underestimation is fatal." The room went silent. Even the storm outside seemed to pause in reverence, letting the tension hang in the damp air. Curtis, Diaz, Walton, and Briggs exchanged glances, realization dawning with terrifying clarity. They had cornered Holly Mercer in the hallway, a mistake they could never undo. And now they were under the watchful eye of a veteran, witnessing the power and precision of someone who had mastered body and mind. Jensen stepped closer to Holly, lowering his voice. "She's here for a reason," he said. "This is not just training. It's evaluation, situational, mental, tactical. She's observing, correcting, preparing. And you four, you're part of the lesson. Pay attention or you fail entirely." The four cornerers felt their stomachs twist with fear. The weight of their mistakes pressed down on them like the storm outside, relentless, unforgiving. Curtis wanted to speak, to argue, to reclaim something of his pride, but the authority in Holly's eyes, the calm, lethal precision she exuded, silenced him instantly. Holly spoke again, voice quiet, controlled, yet echoing through the barracks like a warning. "You will follow, yes, but you will not just follow me blindly. You will observe, absorb, and execute. And you will understand that every move you make, every decision, every hesitation is visible. Every mistake will be remembered." Briggs whispered under his breath, I don't think we're ready for this." Holly's lips twitched into the faintest hint of a smile. "No one is ever ready for this, but you will either adapt or you will fail, and this is only the beginning." The storm outside shifted again, rain pattering against the roof in irregular, insistent beats. The cornerers noticed Holly's unflinching focus, the way she surveyed the room, the subtle movements of her eyes and hands, everything measured, precise, deliberate. It was the calm before the storm, a reminder that she was not merely teaching by example, she was preparing them for a reality they could not yet see. Curtis finally spoke, voice tight with a mix of fear and awe. "So, this is what you do. You test everyone like this." Holly's eyes swept over him, icy and measured. "No, I don't test. I prepare. And the ones who survive remember what it feels like to be at the edge of control, the edge of fear, the edge of understanding." Diaz whispered, "And we were supposed to learn." "Yes," Holly said simply. "Learn, absorb, adapt, survive, fail, and the consequences are yours alone." The four cornerers sat back, silent. Their previous bravado had vanished, replaced by the heavy realization that they were not merely dealing with a peer. They were dealing with someone whose skill, discipline, and control transcended everything they had known about training, about authority, about fear. Jensen's voice cut through the tension again, low and commanding. "Remember this. You had your chance to confront Holly Mercer on your own terms. You failed. Now you will watch, you will follow, and perhaps by the end you will understand what it truly means to survive under someone like her." Holly's gaze returned to the four cornerers, unflinching, commanding, and precise. "The lesson begins now, and you will either follow or be left behind. Every step you take, every breath you draw will be part of this test. You have no choice, and neither do I, but know this. The storm outside is nothing compared to what you will face inside. Curtis swallowed, finally meeting her gaze, the weight of fear and awe pressing down on him. "We will follow," he whispered. Holly's faint smile deepened ever so slightly. "Good. Then begin observing, begin absorbing, begin preparing yourselves, because this is only the first step." The room grew silent again, punctuated only by the soft sound of rain outside. Curtis, Diaz, Walton, and Briggs realized with a chilling certainty Holly Mercer had already won. They had been cornered once, humiliated, and now they were being taught not just about physical skill, but about awareness, control, and survival in a way they had never imagined. And as Jensen exited the barracks, leaving Holly and the cornerers alone, the words lingered in the room like a warning. Some lessons are unavoidable, and some teachers are storms you cannot outrun. The four recruits sat frozen, hearts hammering, knowing that the real test was about to begin, and that Holly Mercer was the storm they would have to endure. Dawn broke over Camp McAllister, though the early morning light was gray and filtered through lingering clouds. The ground was still slick with rain, puddles reflecting the towering obstacle structures that had already been soaked and hardened by the storm. Holly Mercer led Curtis, Diaz, Walton, and Briggs toward the advanced obstacle course, a series of challenges designed to push recruits to their limits: walls to scale, mud pits to cross, ropes to climb, and narrow beams to balance on. But this was not simply physical endurance. Holly's test was as much mental as it was physical. The four cornerers followed closely, hearts hammering. Curtis's hands trembled slightly as he glanced at the course ahead. Every structure seemed designed not just to challenge strength, but to expose weakness, hesitation, and poor judgment. Holly moved ahead with fluid precision, each motion deliberate, controlled, almost effortless. "Pay attention," Holly said, voice calm, precise, carrying authority without shouting. "Every movement matters, every choice matters. One misstep and the consequences are yours to bear." Diaz swallowed hard, watching as Holly vaulted over the first mud trench, landing silently and perfectly balanced. He whispered, She doesn't even get tired. It's like watching a predator in its natural environment." Briggs muttered, voice shaking, I can't even imagine doing that. And she makes it look effortless." Curtis, usually the loudest and most brash, was silent, his jaw tight. He had realized the full weight of their mistake. They had cornered Holly Mercer before, and now they were cornered again, this time by her expectation, skill, and precision. The first obstacle was deceptively simple, a waist-high wall, slick with rain. Holly approached, assessing the height, the angle, and the grip points instinctively. In a smooth motion, she leapt, grabbed the top, and swung herself over in one fluid motion, landing perfectly on the other side without breaking stride. "Your turn," she said, glancing back at the four cornerers. Curtis took the lead, trying to mimic her movements. His hand slipped on the wet wood, and he tumbled into the mud below with a wet thud. Diaz, Walton, and Briggs exchanged horrified glances. Holly's voice cut through the tension, calm but commanding. "Observe, learn, then act. Hesitation will cost you more than embarrassment. It will cost you progress, control, and respect. You have to adapt to survive." One by one, they attempted the obstacle, each faltering, slipping, or hesitating at crucial moments. Holly watched without moving, her eyes noting every misstep, every flaw, every twitch of panic. "Stop thinking about yourself," Holly said quietly as Diaz splashed down into a puddle for the third time. "Stop thinking about your fear. Stop thinking about pride. Focus on the movement. Focus on the environment. Focus on the goal. Everything else is a distraction." Walton shook his head, muttering, "It's impossible. She makes it impossible." Holly's gaze locked onto him. "Impossible is only what you have yet to master. Every step is a lesson. Every fall is information. Every moment of hesitation teaches you exactly where you are weak. Learn from it. move forward. The recruits pressed on, struggling through mud, water, and slippery surfaces. Holly led the way over balanced beams, tight ropes, and swinging logs. She moved with a controlled fluidity, every action calculated, her eyes scanning the course and the recruits, anticipating mistakes before they occurred. At the center of the course stood the tower, a 10-foot vertical wall with no handholds except for small, barely visible grips. Holly approached, assessing it silently. In one motion she climbed, twisting her body, using her legs and arms with perfect efficiency, and reached the top in seconds. The four cornerers stared, jaws tight. Curtis whispered under his breath, she's insane. Briggs muttered, voice trembling, no one should be able to move like that. Holly's voice was calm, but each word carried weight. Watch, learn, adapt. You will not succeed by force alone. You will succeed by focus, by observation, by anticipating what others cannot see. Curtis took a deep breath and attempted the climb. His fingers slipped immediately. Diaz tried next and stumbled halfway up. Walton froze, uncertain where to place his next step. Briggs barely managed to grab the top but nearly fell on the other side. Holly observed each of them, her eyes scanning, her mind calculating. Finally, she approached them, standing at the base of the tower. You think strength alone is enough, she said quietly, almost a whisper. It is. Strength without awareness is useless. Awareness without execution is useless. You must combine them, mind, body, and instinct, to survive the moment. This is the essence of control, and this is why you failed before. The cornerers absorbed her words silently. Each realized painfully that her test was not just physical. It was mental, tactical, psychological. Every motion, every hesitation, every instinct they had relied upon was now under scrutiny. Holly moved forward again, leading them to the next obstacle, the pit, a 6-foot-wide, mud-filled trench. On the far side was a narrow ledge leading to another vertical climb. She stepped in without hesitation, sinking slightly in the mud but moving smoothly, her body fluid, efficient. You see, she said over her shoulder, fear will slow you, panic will destroy you. But observation, and calculation will carry you through. Curtis, Diaz, Walton, and Briggs followed hesitantly, each struggling to maintain balance. Holly's eyes caught every falter, every misstep, but her presence remained calm, guiding, commanding. As they reached the final obstacle, a series of overhead bars suspended above a deep mud trench, Holly paused. She turned to them, eyes sharp. This is where the truth becomes unavoidable. Either you understand how to move with control, precision, and awareness, or you fail. Completely. Curtis clenched his fist, jaw tight. We can't do this. It's too much. Holly's eyes softened slightly, but her tone was unwavering. You can. You will, but you must forget fear, forget ego, forget doubt. Every moment counts. Every movement is decisive. One by one, she swung across the bars with perfect rhythm, landing on the other side with barely a sound. The four cornerers hesitated, uncertainty gripping them. But the longer they lingered, the more impossible it became to ignore her lesson. Finally, Curtis stepped forward, hands trembling. He gripped the first bar, testing it, swinging his weight. Holly's eyes followed, calm but exacting. Diaz, Walton, and Briggs followed, each faltering but moving forward under her watchful guidance. The storm of exhaustion, fear, and awe pressed down on them. They realized fully, Holly Mercer was not merely a trainer, she was a standard they could not yet reach, a storm they could not outrun, and a lesson they would never forget. As they reached the far side of the obstacle course, rain began to fall again, soft at first, then steadily. Holly turned to face them, eyes calm, voice steady, carrying authority. Today you have seen your limitations. You have felt the gap between what you thought you could do and what is possible. Remember this. Learn it. Internalize it. Because tomorrow the obstacles will not be physical. They will be in your mind. and the lessons will continue relentless, unyielding, unavoidable. Curtis, Diaz, Walton, and Briggs exchanged glances, hearts pounding, minds racing. They had survived the course physically, but the real weight of the lesson pressed down on them. They had been tested beyond strength and endurance. They had been tested against awareness, precision, and control, the core of what Holly Mercer embodied. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside them, relentless, unyielding, and impossible to ignore. And Holly Mercer, standing at the far side of the obstacle course, wet, mud-streaked, and calm, waited silently for the next lesson to begin. The sun had barely risen, but the training yard was alive with tension. Holly Mercer stood at the edge of the muddy field, her gaze sweeping over Curtis, Diaz, Walton, and Briggs. Their muscles ached, their bodies trembled with exhaustion, and yet none dared look away from her. Today's obstacle course had left them physically drained, but Holly's lesson was far from over. "Today," she began, voice calm but absolute, "you will learn that control is not just physical. It is mental, it is emotional, and it is tactical. One falter in judgment, one hesitation, and you fail entirely. Are you ready?" The four cornerers nodded silently, fear coiling in their stomachs. Curtis swallowed hard. He wanted to argue, to say no, to resist, but Holly's gaze froze him in place. Resistance wasn't permitted. Holly led them to a shallow trench filled with murky water. Above it hung a network of ropes, swinging just enough to test balance, precision, and timing. "The objective is simple," Holly said, stepping onto the first rope. "Cross without falling. But understand this, every second counts. Panic will destroy you. Focus will carry you." She moved across the ropes like a shadow, fluid and precise. Her boots barely touched the ropes, her arms steady as she swung from knot to knot. She reached the far side without so much as a splash. Curtis stepped forward next, gripping the rope with trembling hands. His first swing caused him to wobble, nearly plunging into the trench below. Holly's voice, calm but unyielding, cut through the chaos. "Adjust, breathe. Your fear is your weight, let go of it." Diaz followed, Walton after, and Briggs last. Each faltered, slipping, hesitating, splashing into the trench before correcting. Holly's presence was relentless. She didn't touch them. She didn't scold. She didn't interfere. And yet every failure, every falter was seared into their minds. "Good," Holly said softly once all four reached the other side, soaked and mud-streaked. "But that was only the first step. The true challenge begins now." She led them toward the gauntlet, a series of mental and physical obstacles designed to push recruits to the edge of exhaustion. Mud pits, walls, ropes, balance beams, all interspersed with tactical decision points where hesitation or indecision could cause failure. The four cornerers glanced at each other, dread pooling in their stomachs. Curtis was the first to falter, misjudging a jump between balance beams and crashing into mud below. Diaz tried to correct but slipped, nearly catching him in his fall. Walton froze mid-step, his confidence shattered. Briggs, silent and pale, crawled carefully across the beams, avoiding mistakes but moving painfully slowly. Holly moved alongside them, guiding with her gaze and minimal verbal instruction. "Control your breathing, focus your mind, anticipate every movement. Panic is not an option, awareness is everything." The recruits struggled to keep pace, but Holly's silent evaluation made every mistake feel like exposure. Curtis's chest heaved, sweat mixing with mud and rain. Diaz's hands shook. Walton's legs ached with every precarious step. Briggs's jaw tightened, eyes focused on not failing. Halfway through the gauntlet, Holly stopped. She turned to the four cornerers, eyes sharp. "Look around," she said quietly. "What do you see?" Curtis blinked. Mud, obstacles, rain, fatigue. Holly shook her head slightly. "Wrong, you see fear, you see hesitation, you see distraction, and you see yourselves small, panicked, predictable. This is the edge of control. If you do not master your mind, your body will betray you, every time." Diaz whispered, voice trembling, How do you stay so calm?" Holly's gaze swept over him, calm but piercing. I focus. I anticipate. I act before chaos can claim me. Every failure I've seen, every misstep, every hesitation, I've survived them all because I control myself. And now you will try. She stepped forward, leading them to the final obstacle, a narrow plank suspended 20 feet above a shallow pit with swinging ropes above and below. The plank was slick, the height intimidating, the slightest misstep fatal in terms of failing the exercise. Holly's eyes swept over the recruits. Your fear is obvious, she said softly. Let it go. You will either cross or fall. Your mind decides long before your body acts. Control your mind, control your body, or you fail. Curtis stepped onto the plank first, shaking violently. Each step was tentative, each foot placement uncertain. Halfway across, the plank wobbled. His chest heaved. Panic clawed at him and he froze. Holly's eyes caught him immediately. Breathe, focus. One movement at a time, she instructed. Her calmness was infectious, a contrast to his spiraling fear. Curtis took a deep breath, tightened his core, and continued. Step by step, he reached the other side, drenched and trembling. Diaz followed, his movements hesitant but improving with each step. Walton faltered, but Holly's silent observation guided his focus, and he completed the crossing. Briggs, quiet and determined, moved steadily, controlled and precise. Once all four reached the other side, Holly turned to face them. Rain dripped from her hair, mud streaked her uniform, but her posture remained perfect. Her eyes scanned each cornerer, calm, calculated, observing every micro-expression. Today, she said quietly, you have faced the edge of control. You have seen what fear, hesitation, and indecision do to the body and mind. You have seen your limitations, and you have learned, in part, what it means to survive under pressure. The recruits' hearts pounded, their bodies exhausted, minds reeling. Curtis whispered, barely audible, We didn't know it was like this. Holly's gaze met his. Most don't. Most never survive it. Most never realize that the mind is just as dangerous an obstacle as the body. Strength alone does not carry you. Awareness alone does not carry you. Only the combination of skill, focus, and control ensures survival. Diaz's voice trembling asked, and we can learn that. Holly's eyes softened slightly, but her presence remained commanding. Yes, if you are willing, but understand this, lessons of this magnitude are relentless. You will be tested again and again. The storm is constant, and only those who adapt will survive it. Curtis, still panting, nodded slowly. We want to learn, we'll follow, we'll do whatever it takes. Holly's faint smile returned, almost imperceptible. Good. You will need that commitment, because the final lesson, the one that determines if you can truly endure, is coming, and it will challenge everything you think you know about fear, control, and survival. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the drenched, muddy recruits and the relentless determination in Holly's eyes. The storm outside mirrored the storm within them, unyielding, unpredictable, and impossible to ignore. And in that moment, Curtis, Diaz, Walton, and Briggs realized with chilling clarity they were still cornered, still being tested, still under the gaze of someone who could see every weakness and every hesitation before it even existed. Holly Mercer turned toward the next challenge, her posture calm, precise, unyielding. The storm and her lesson was far from over. The sky was bruised with heavy clouds as Holly Mercer led Curtis, Diaz, Walton, and Briggs to the final training zone. The air was thick with humidity, mud and water clinging to their exhausted bodies. The recruits' muscles burned with fatigue, and every step felt like wading through fire. Yet Holly moved effortlessly ahead, a beacon of control and precision, her eyes scanning the terrain, the weather, and the recruits with the same unflinching intensity she had displayed all day. This, Holly said, her voice calm yet absolute, is the culmination. Everything you've seen, everything you've felt, everything you've feared, it comes to this moment. No hesitation, no doubt, no excuses. Curtis's hands trembled. His jaw ached from clenching, muscles screaming from the previous day's exercises. Diaz looked pale and broken. Walton's legs wobbled with exhaustion and Briggs wiped mud from his face, silent but tense. None of them dared speak further. Holly's presence had stripped them of all bravado. Ahead of them was the assault course of truth, a combination of physical obstacles, high walls, rope swings, and balance beams intertwined with tactical decision points, timed challenges, and problem-solving tasks that demanded flawless coordination. Above all, it tested psychological endurance. Every second amplified fear, every misstep magnified consequences. "You will not just cross this course," Holly continued. "You will master it. Every movement, every decision, every reaction is part of the lesson. Fail, and you fail yourself entirely. Remember who I am. Remember what I represent. And do not forget what cornering me has cost you." Curtis felt his heart hammering in his chest. He had cornered her in the hallway once, believing arrogance and intimidation could mask his inexperience. Now, fully aware of the gap between them, he realized just how little he truly knew about Holly Mercer, about her skill, her control, and her relentless standards. Holly stepped onto the first platform. A rope swing, 20 feet to the next platform, suspended over a shallow, mud-filled trench, awaited. She propelled herself forward in a fluid, effortless motion, landing perfectly. Curtis, Diaz, Walton, and Briggs followed hesitantly, each trembling as they attempted to mirror her movements. Some failed, splashing into mud, but Holly's eyes missed nothing. She did not intervene, but the weight of her observation alone drove them to focus, adapt, and try again. At the next obstacle, a vertical wall with minimal handholds, Holly paused briefly. "Your mind is as critical as your body," she reminded them. "Every hesitation, every overthinking moment will cost you. Move decisively. Execute without doubt." Curtis inhaled sharply and began the climb, recalling Holly's previous demonstrations. Halfway up, his hand slipped. Panic clawed at him. Holly's eyes met his, calm yet piercing, and he felt himself steady. He forced his mind to focus, controlled his breath, and completed the ascent. Diaz followed, faltering once but recovering. Walton moved steadily, and Briggs, precise and cautious, scaled it without incident. "Good," Holly said quietly. "But you are not done. You will not succeed with mere endurance. You will succeed with total awareness." Ahead lay the final stage. A suspended rope bridge, slick with mud and rain, 15 feet above a pit, followed by a tactical simulation requiring split-second decisions under pressure. This was the ultimate test: physical skill, balance, coordination, and above all, mental control under extreme stress. Curtis stepped onto the bridge, each foot placement tentative. Halfway across, the bridge swayed violently. Panic threatened to overtake him. Holly's voice cut through the chaos. "Breathe, observe, anticipate, one motion at a time. Do not allow fear to dictate your actions." Curtis forced himself to steady, balancing, adjusting. Diaz followed. Walton's legs wobbled dangerously and Briggs moved with deliberate caution. Holly crossed effortlessly, watching each of them, calculating, analyzing, preparing them for the final tactical challenge. At the end of the bridge, a room awaited, filled with simulated combat scenarios, multiple targets, obstacles, and surprise variables designed to force rapid decision-making. Holly paused at the entrance. "This," she said softly but firmly, "is where survival is determined. You will respond to chaos with control, to confusion with clarity, to fear with focus. Everything you've learned comes into play now. Fail, and the lesson is complete. Succeed, and you gain understanding, but only understanding, not relief. The storm never truly ends." The four cornerers entered hesitantly. Alarms blared, dummies simulated hostile attacks, doors opened and closed, obstacles shifted unexpectedly. Curtis froze for a moment, overwhelmed. Diaz stumbled, Walton nearly tripped, and Briggs hesitated, paralyzed by indecision. Holly moved alongside them, her eyes sharp, voice guiding subtly. Observe first, assess second, act decisively. Hesitation is fatal. Curtis focused, recalling Holly's lessons from the gauntlet: breath, awareness, anticipation. He moved deliberately, neutralizing the first simulated target. Diaz followed, remembering her calmness under pressure, and executed flawlessly. Walton's confidence grew with each action, and Briggs, silent and methodical, moved like a shadow, precise and effective. Holly finally addressed them all. "This is not victory, it is understanding. You cornered me once, thinking skill alone could dominate. Today you have seen what true control means: mental, physical, emotional. Remember this: cornering someone like me comes with consequences. Observation, anticipation, and execution are your only allies." Curtis, drenched, exhausted, and trembling, looked at Holly. We understand, but why push us so far?" Holly's gaze softened slightly, though it retained its sharp edge. "Because most never learn. Most never realize the cost of arrogance, the cost of underestimation. You cornered me once, thinking it a game. I cornered you in response, teaching a lesson you will not forget. And if you carry this forward, if you truly internalize what you've experienced, you will survive where others fail." The recruits processed her words, the storm outside echoing the storm they had endured. Lightning flashed, illuminating Holly's mud-streaked form, her calm precision standing in stark contrast to their exhaustion. Curtis finally whispered, We will never forget. You've changed how we see everything, not just training, not just survival, everything." Holly nodded faintly. "Good, that is the lesson. Fear is constant, chaos is inevitable, control is everything. Remember who I am, remember what you've seen, and remember that the storm does not end when the exercise concludes." Diaz, Walton, and Briggs nodded silently. Each had faced the edge of control, and each had survived under Holly Mercer's unyielding presence. They had been cornered, tested, and humbled, and now they understood that true mastery required far more than strength. It demanded awareness, precision, and the ability to act decisively under pressure. Holly turned and walked away, her form fading into the morning mist, leaving the four cornerers standing in the rain, mud, and exhaustion. A profound silence settled over the training yard, broken only by the steady patter of rain. The lesson was complete, not just a demonstration of skill, but an education in survival, control, and respect. Curtis finally exhaled, voice trembling. She really is unstoppable." Briggs whispered, voice barely audible, "Not just unstoppable, untouchable. And now we know why." The four cornerers looked at each other, a mix of awe, fear, and determination burning in their eyes. They had survived the impossible. They had learned the unteachable. And Holly Mercer, as always, had taught them with one simple, undeniable truth: underestimating her was a mistake that could never be repeated. As the storm outside began to ease, the recruits realized with chilling clarity that the training and Holly's lessons would follow them forever.